G'day, my name's Alan Gamble. Welcome to another episode of Aussie Box Office Charts. Toy Story 5 opens big. Let's dive into this weekend's box office. So, first of all, Toy Story 5 opens at number 1 as expected, opening with $9.7 million, just shy of the $10 million mark. That is a really good opening. That is the second highest opening of 2026 so far, and a Toy Story franchise high opening. We'll dive more into its franchise and Pixar in general after the top 10, but just shy of what it needed to get onto the top openings of June of all time in Australia. It needed to bring in $10.6 million to get into 10th place to knock out Incredibles 2 from 2018. At number 2, we have Obsession, bringing in another $2 million in its 6th week of release, dropping 25% for a current total of $18.7 million. That movie is doing insane. Disclosure Day drops down to number 3 in its 2nd week, dropping a hefty 52% in its 2nd week, with another $1.7 million for a current total of $6.7 million. Scary Movie down at number 4 with another $790,000, dropping 56% in its 3rd week of release for a current total of $7.8 million. And rounding out the top 5 is Backrooms with another $770,000, its 4th week in release dropping 43% for a current total of $13.2 million. Moving on to 6 through 10, Michael stays at number 6, its 9th week in release, bringing in another $450,000, dropping 48% for a current total of $45.1 million. Masters of the Universe drops down to number 7 with another $400,000, its 3rd week in release, dropping 56% for a current total of $4.3 million. Leviticus, the Aussie buzzy horror that opens with $330,000, manages to sneak into the top 10 with some hefty competition, with Obsession and Backrooms still dominating the horror market, but it's apparently quite good, so I'm glad it got into the top 10. Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu with another $250,000, its 5th week in release, dropping 56% for a current total of $14.5 million. And rounding out the top 10 is Cocktail 2 with $240,000 in its opening week. That is a Hindi language romantic comedy out of India. And before we dive into Toy Story, we obviously have to update our top 5 openings of 2026. So Toy Story 5 lands at number 2. Couldn't quite beat out The Devil Wears Prada 2 with its $11 million opening, but with $9.7 million sees it comfortably at number 2. That knocks the Super Mario Galaxy movie down to number 3 with $8.4 million. Michael at number 4 with $7.9 million, and Star Wars, The Mandalorian and Grogu with $6.4 million. That obviously knocks something off, and Project Hail Mary with its $6.1 million opening is out of the top 5. So, first of all, a quick glance at Toy Story opening weekends at the Aussie box office. Going back all the way to 1995, it looks at something like this. Toy Story in 95 opened to just over $1 million. Toy Story 2 in 1999 opened to $2.1 million. Toy Story 3 in 2010 opened to $7.7 million. And then in 2018, Toy Story 4 opened to $8 million. So, Toy Story 5 opening with its $9.7 million does see it top this chart, both in gross and chronologically. If we adjust for inflation and then switch it high to low, it's not the highest, but it's still well up there and well in a healthy state. So, adjusted for inflation, Toy Story 3 from 2010 is the highest opener with an adjusted $11.4 million opening. Toy Story 4 in 2018, adjusted, is $10.1 million. So $9.7 million is still a fantastic opening for the franchise. I expect to see a lot more Toy Stories moving forward. They're not going to end it and close it off as they tried to do with number 3. We're going to get these forever. Looking at Toy Story 5 in context of Pixar in its entirety, it came in as the 3rd highest opening of all time for Pixar in the Australian box office. You can see there it's at number 3, just behind Finding Dory from 2016, and just ahead by a smidge of Finding Nemo in 2003. The top Pixar opening is still The Incredibles 2 from 2018, and if we adjust for inflation, it does drop down a bit, but not that much. So if we adjust Pixar openings for inflation, it does drop down to the 6th highest opening of all time for Pixar, just behind Toy Story 4 and just ahead of Inside Out 2. The top one adjusted for inflation is Finding Nemo, which has an adjusted opening of $17.6 million because that movie was massive, especially being a Pixar movie set in, Australia. Finding Dory is the 2nd highest, and The Incredibles 2 comes in at number 3. And a quick aside, I also was going to take a look at the Robin Hood openings in context with all the Robin Hood movies that have been released over the years, going back to 1991, where we got 2 releasing in the Australian box office, several weeks apart. But unfortunately, The Death of Robin Hood didn't even make it into the top 10 this weekend. I did go and see it, and I think it was a very mixed bag of a movie. I liked it, but I can understand the mixed reviews and the low cinema score. But if it didn't make it into the top 10, and full numbers are not out yet because the numbers is still way, way, way behind and is still a broken mess of a website, but it's opening outside the top 10, maybe if we do get numbers for it next week, I will bring up a Robin Hood chart because I've got all the historical numbers, just not for the most recent one. Moving on to the top 10 of 2026, so the top 10 of everything released in calendar year 2026 is the Australian box office. No major changes, just one shift around. Michael stays at number 1 at the highest grossing movie of the year in Australia at $45.1 million, and The Devil Wears Prada 2 is at number 2 with just over $41 million. The Super Mario Galaxy movie is at $39.3 million, and Project Hail Mary at number 4 with $39.1 million. Wuthering Heights stays at number 5 with $20.3 million, but closing the gap quickly on Wuthering Heights is at number 6, Obsession, at currently $18.7 million. That might beat it by next weekend. At number 7, we have The Mandalorian and Grogu with $14.5 million. Backrooms moves up to number 8 with its $13.2 million, knocking Song Sung Blue, that was released on January 1st, down to number 9 with its $12.2 million. Goat rounds out the top 10 with its $11.9 million. Moving on to upcoming releases, theatrical releases, 25th of June in wide release, obviously the big pair is Supergirl from DC, directed by Craig Gillespie, starring Millie Alcock, Eve Ridley, and Matthias Schoenhardt. I've booked the day off for this one as I'm a big fan of the source material that this movie is based on. We also have Monsters and Minions is also releasing, the next phase of the Minions, directed by Peter Coffin and starring Trey Parker, Allison Janney, and Christoph Waltz. I will not be seeing this one because I do not like the Minions. In limited release, so check your smaller and indie cinemas, we have Bleach, the 1,000-Year Blood War, The Calamity. If anime is your thing, then we have the latest big anime big screen event for you. Carry On Jatta for the 4th entry in this Punjabi language comedy franchise out of India that started all the way back in 2012. We also have Glen Rothan, which is Brian Cox's directorial film debut starring Brian Cox and Alan Cumming. Over on streaming releases, we have a few movies, starting first of all with Little Brother, a new comedy movie on Netflix directed by Matt Spicer and starring John Cena, Eric Andre, and Michelle Monaghan. It releases on June 26th. We also have Strung, a new mystery drama movie on Peacock directed by Malcolm D. Lee, starring Chloe Bailey, Lynn Whitfield, and Lucian Laviscount, and it releases on June 26th as well. New series we have coming is Life, Larry and the Pursuit of Unhappiness, a new mini-series on HBO Max from creator Larry David that releases on June 27th, and Adventure Time Side Quests, an Adventure Time spin-off that releases on Disney Plus on June 29th. In returning series, we have Avatar The Last Airbender. Returning after 2.5 years is Avatar The Last Airbender with its Season 2 on Netflix. You can find it on June 25th. And also, we have The Bear returning for its 5th and final season on Disney Plus on June 26th. So, 4 movies for this week's challenge of movies from 2000 to 2009, or the noughties. First up was a rewatch of Shooter from 2007, directed by Anton Fuqua, starring Mark Wahlberg, Michael Pena, Danny Glover, and Kate Mara. A specialist sniper gets asked to scout for a special mission, only for it to not be as simple as first appears. If I believed in the concept of guilty pleasure movies, this would be one of them. It's a terrible movie that I just enjoy. It's very simple, very basic, but it's a good time with a good setup and some great action sequences while having the rest of it be pretty basic and brain off, but great movie. Next up was another rewatch of 2006's The Devil Wears Prada, directed by David Frankel and starring Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, Emily Blunt, and Stanley Tucci. A fresh journalist student takes an assistant job for a high-end fashion magazine run by a highly demanding boss. Had never logged this one, which means my first rewatch since at least 2013, and yeah, it's a good time. Nothing too challenging, and maybe tries to make fashion a bit more important than it actually is, but I figured I'd rewatch this one before watching the new Legacy sequel that is the highest opening movie of 2026. Next up was a new one for me as the French 2004 sci-fi action District B13, no relation to District 9. Directed by Pierre Morel and starring David Bell and Cyril Raffaelli. In the dystopian Paris of 2010, the ghettos have been walled off and an undercover cop and an escaped prisoner need to make their way back in. This one was a fun, wild ride. An early 2000s French movie, so yes, there is lots of both techno music in the score and parkour action sequences. There are normal action sequences as well, and they are great. The movie itself is pretty simple battle of class warfare, but in a movie like this, you're not here for the plot or the performances. You're here for the great fun action sequences, and it has lots of them. Finally was Deja Vu from 2006, directed by the late great Tony Scott and starring Denzel Washington, Paula Pattinson, and Val Kilmer. An ATF detective investigates a devastating attack, gets recruited by a specialist government team that has some advanced technology that allows them to investigate beyond traditional means. This was a good, solid crime thriller with some light sci-fi elements, not the best in class by any means, but pretty solid that you can't go too wrong with. Everyone loves a Tony Scott movie. I do. Everyone loves a Denzel Washington movie. I do. And Val Kilmer, he was a legend. Hit and miss, he did some duds. This is not one of the duds. Taking a look at this week's challenge, it's We Are Family. So the premise is simple, but complicated to dig through. It's find a movie with someone from an acting family. So a family that has multiple actors involved. Not involved in the same movie, but as long as they're from an acting family. So the Quaid movie, the Gyllenhaals, etc. A few people have kicked it off with Armageddon or A Fool for Killers. We'll see how we go. Let's have a look at my shortlist. My shortlist is very short this week, with just a few to start with. Supergirl, Escape from LA, Dead Man's Wire, Roommates, and Voicemail for Isabel. We may discover more during the week, but that's it for now. But that is it for me for this week. Tune in next week where we will be looking at how Toy Story 5 is continuing to do. We're diving into the school holidays and Supergirl. I'm really anticipating it, but I think it won't do as big as Superman last year, personally. But we will be crunching all the DC numbers next week with Supergirl's opening to see how it stacks up against the other DC movies, other Superman movies, other Supergirl movies, all the things, because we have all those numbers from the 70s and 80s Supermans, which is great. So Superman and Supergirl from, I think, 1987, it bombed. It was a terrible, terrible movie that did horrifically at the box office. So I don't think this Supergirl is going to do any numbers close to that one. But tune in next week and we'll crunch all those numbers. Until then, watch more movies. Bye.